But it was prettier 30 years ago. That multitudinous eruption of domiciliary pasteboard which now graces the landscape in the direction of the low, blue Waltham Hills had not yet taken place. There were no genteel cottages to put the shabby meadows and scrubby orchards to shame, a juxtaposition by which in later years neither element of the contrast is gained. Certain crooked crossroads then, as I remember them, were more deeply and naturally rural than the solitary dwellings on the long grassy slopes beside them, under the tall, customary elm that curved its foliage in mid-air like the outward dropping ears of a girdled wheat sheaf, sat with their shingled hoods well pulled down on their ears, had no prescience whatever of the fashion of French roofs, weather-wrinkled old peasant women, as you might call them, quietly wearing the native coif, and never dreaming of mounting bonnets and indecently exposing their venerable brows. That winter was what is called an open one. There was much cold, but little snow. The roads were firm and free, and I was rarely compelled by the weather to forego my exercise. One gray December afternoon, I had sought it in the direction of the adjacent town of Medford, and I was retracing my steps at an even pace and watching the pale, cold tints, the transparent amber and faded rose color, which curtained in wintry fashion the western sky and reminded me of a skeptical smile on the lips of a beautiful woman. I came, as dusk was falling, to a narrow road which I had never traversed, and which I imagined offered me a short-cut homeward. I was about 3 miles away. I was late, and would have been thankful to make them 2. I diverged, walked some 10 minutes, and then perceived that the road had a very unfrequented air. The wheel ruts looked old, the stillness seemed peculiarly sensible, and yet down the road stood a house, so that it must in some degree have been a thoroughfare. On one side was a high natural embankment, on the top of which was perched an apple orchard, whose tangled boughs made a stretch of coarse black lacework hung across the coldly rosy west. In a short time I came to the house, and I immediately found myself interested in it. I stopped in front of it, gazing hard. I hardly knew why, but with a vague mixture of curiosity and timidity. It was a house like most of the houses thereabouts, except that it was decidedly a handsome specimen of its class. It stood on a grassy slope. It had its tall, impartially drooping elm beside it, and its old black well cover at its shoulder. But it was of very large proportions, and it had a striking look of solidity and stoutness of timber. It had lived to a good old age, too, for the woodwork on its doorway and under its eaves, carefully and abundantly carved, referred it to the middle at the latest of the last century. All this had once been painted white, but the broad back of time, leaning against the doorposts for 100 years, had laid bare the grain of the wood. Behind the house stretched an orchard of apple trees, more gnarled and fantastic than usual, and wearing in the deepening dusk a blighted and exhausted aspect. All the windows of the house had rusty shutters without slats, and these were closely drawn. There was no sign of life about it. It looked blank, bare and vacant, and yet, as I lingered near it, it seemed to have a familiar meaning, an audible eloquence. I have always thought of the impression made upon me at first sight by that gray colonial dwelling as a proof that induction may sometimes be near akin to divination. For after all, there was nothing on the face of the matter to warrant the very serious induction that I made. I fell back and crossed the road. The last red light of the sunset disengaged itself as it was about to vanish, and rested faintly for a moment on the time-silvered front of the old house. It touched with perfect regularity the series of small panes in the fan-shaped window above the door, and twinkled there fantastically. Then it died away, and left the place more intensely somber. At this moment I said to myself with the accent of profound conviction, "The house is simply haunted." Somehow immediately I believed it, and so long as I was not shut up inside, the idea gave me pleasure. It was implied in the aspect of the house, and it explained it. Half an hour before, if I had been asked, I would have said, as befitted a young man who was explicitly cultivating cheerful views of the supernatural, that there were no such things as haunted houses. But the dwelling before me gave a vivid meaning to the empty words. It had been spiritually blighted. The longer I looked at it, the intenser seemed the secret that it held. I walked all around it. I tried to peep here and there, through a crevice in the shutters, and I took a puerile satisfaction in laying my hand on the doorknob and gently turning it. If the door had yielded, would I have gone in? Would I have penetrated the dusky stillness? My audacity, fortunately, was not put to the test. The portal was admirably solid, and I was unable even to shake it. At last I turned away, casting many looks behind me. I pursued my way, and, after a longer walk than I had bargained for, reached the high road. At a certain distance below the point at which the long lane I have mentioned entered it, stood a comfortable, tidy dwelling, which might have offered itself as the model of the house which is in no sense haunted, which has no sinister secrets, and knows nothing but blooming prosperity. Its clean white paint stared placidly through the dusk, and its vine-covered porch had been dressed in straw for the winter. An old one-horse chaise, freighted with 2 departing visitors, was leaving the door, and through the uncurtained windows I saw the lamp-lit sitting-room and the table spread with the early tea, which had been improvised for the comfort of the guests. The mistress of the house had come to the gate with her friends. She lingered there after the chaise had wheeled creakingly away, half to watch them down the road, and half to give me, as I passed in the twilight, a questioning look. She was a comely, quick young woman, with a sharp, dark eye, and I ventured to stop and speak to her. "That house down that side road," I said, "about a mile from here, the only one. Can you tell me whom it belongs to?" She stared at me for a moment, and I thought colored a little. "Our folks never go down that road," she said briefly. "But it's a short way to Medford," I answered. She gave a little toss of her head. "Perhaps it would turn out a long way. At any rate, we don't use it." This was interesting. A thrifty Yankee household must have good reasons for this scorn of time-saving processes. "But you know the house, at least," I said. "Well, I have seen it." "And to whom does it belong?" She gave a little laugh and looked away, as if she were aware that, to a stranger, her words might seem to savor of agricultural superstition. "I guess it belongs to them that are in it. But is there anyone in it? It is completely closed." "That makes no difference. They never come out, and no one ever goes in." And she turned away. But I laid my hand on her arm respectfully. "You mean," I said, "that the house is haunted?" She drew herself away, colored, raised her finger to her lips, and hurried into the house, where in a moment the curtains were dropped over the windows. For several days I thought repeatedly of this little adventure, but I took some satisfaction in keeping it to myself. If the house was not haunted, it was useless to expose my imaginative whims, and if it was agreeable to drain the cup of horror without assistance. I determined, of course, to pass that way again, and a week later, it was the last day of the year. I retraced my steps. I approached the house from the opposite direction, and found myself before it at about the same hour as before. The light was failing, the sky low and gray. The wind wailed along the hard, bare ground and made slow eddies of the frost-blackened leaves. The melancholy mansion stood there, seeming to gather the winter twilight around it and mask itself in it, inscrutably. I hardly knew on what errand I had come, but I had a vague feeling that if this time the doorknob were to turn and the door to open, I should take my heart in my hands and let